Terrifier 3, directed by Damien Leone, stars David Howard Thornton and Lauren Lavera. 5 years after surviving Art the Clown's Halloween massacre, Sienna and Jonathan are still struggling to rebuild their shattered lives. As the holiday season approaches, they try to embrace the Christmas spirit and leave the horrors of the past behind them. But just when they think they're safe, Art returns, determined to turn their holiday cheer into a new nightmare. The festive season quickly unravels as Art unleashes his twisted brand of terror, proving that no holiday is safe. I'm part of the few people that actually quite enjoy the first two Terrifier films. I think they're great examples of the modern grindhouse style of movies, or at least it feels like that's what they're inspired by. And I still acknowledge they're incredibly trashy, but at the same time, I love to watch them for how jam-packed with entertainment they are from start to finish. So the idea of this third movie getting a big screen release was really cool to me, as I didn't think I'd ever get to see these types of movies on the big screen. So now that the movie is finally here for everyone to see, what did I think about it? Firstly, I want to talk about the performances, starting with, of course, David Howard Thornton. He really is the man of the hour in all of these films, and his commitment to the bit in this franchise is such a joy to watch. There's pretty much no change to his character here, and rightfully so, as I think doing something like that so late into the franchise at this stage would be far too jarring for audiences to see, and the filmmakers clearly know this anyways. From the opening scene, Thornton as Art makes an effort to completely steal the show whenever he appears on screen. In a sick and perverted way, it's fun to watch the pure joy that Art gets out of completely dismembering and decapitating people. He has such a blast with it and expresses a wide array of positive emotions without the character ever saying a word. Even with his laugh being silent, you can't help but contagiously laugh along with him, from him being an absolute delight to watch. He's at his best when he's just annoying people and being a complete nuisance to the people around him, specifically in one scene in a bar, which is a riot from the way he interacts with the characters there. When the time comes for Art to be genuinely menacing though, he nails it really well. The guy is a complete sick fuck, and you watch all these heinous things he does, realizing if you were in the same situation, you wouldn't be making it out alive. And that idea alone is enough to make for such an enjoyably threatening villain, which Thornton excels at doing in all three of these movies, and especially here too. Lauren Lavera pulls out a pretty good performance here too. She's a completely different character to how she was in the second movie. In the first two acts, she does a good job at portraying this type of trauma victim, being a lot more socially closed off due to the events that happened to her in the second movie. But there's a shift in a really satisfying scene where she really blows up and goes unhinged so quickly, which was cool to see how fast she was able to snap like that. Along with this, there's many instances where she takes the feelings of herself being in peril and terrified to the utmost extreme, and she sells this really well when you're seeing it on screen. You really feel for her in these moments. She makes herself to be a really engaging character, and you want to see her get out of the situation despite so much already of being happened to her. In a lot of these moments, I think she did well. Samantha Scaffidi did a pretty good job in her role too. She's essentially the deranged quote-unquote wife or lover or accomplice, I suppose, of Art the Clown. Any of those titles could really suit her at this stage. She did a pretty good job at being insanely creepy whenever she was on screen, mixing a blend of both subtle creepiness and displaying truly unhinged insanity whenever these moments came out on screen. It was such a joy to see how over the top she made her performance. It was a delight to see all of this unhinged energy come out, especially towards the third act, where a lot of these moments really shine. If her character returns in the fourth movie, I do wonder where they'll take her from here. Now, a big thing that this movie is being talked about for is its excessive gore and violence, which the franchise is mainly known for. However, I'm here to say, despite maybe one moment in particular, I think the reactions are a little over-exaggerated from a lot of the more general audiences that are probably going to see this movie, which firstly would be weird if they are going to see this and they hadn't have seen the first two movies before going in to see this one, because if they had already seen those two, they should have went into this knowing what they were expecting, which is making me think there are some people that are going into this thing that might not have seen those other two, because the violence isn't too dissimilar to what this franchise has presented its audience before. When the gore and violence is on screen though, it's impressive as always, leaning into the campy element, where some of the effects will admittedly look a little fake, but these moments are only on screen for a couple of seconds anyways. They are always insane to watch, and the creativity going into all the different kills is impressive to see what else could be in store for all the helpless victims in this movie. movie. Whenever I talk about horror movies on this channel, a notable thing I talk about is if the movie is scary or not. I suppose with a movie like this, it's hard to truly determine if it's scary because it's an instant where it depends what an individual person would find scary, as this isn't a horror which is completely over-reliant on jump scares to give the viewer a cheap scare. Its horror comes from how revolting a lot of the things get and how they escalate into being more and more sickening to watch. So if this is something that would make you feel uneasy, then yeah, I suppose it is pretty horrific. Although to me, as fucked as this may sound, I just couldn't help but grin at the sheer creativity that Leone's depraved mind can come up with. I will say, I don't think this movie is better than the second movie upon my first watch, at least. But it's not worse than it either. It's basically on the same level as the second movie. I do think there is a few flaws present in this movie, especially since some of the questions that were presented in the second movie are still kind of left unanswered in this one, with the exclusion of the little clown girl that was introduced in the second movie. I thought at first the opening sequence was meant to be an origin story for this girl, but it ended up being completely unrelated to the character, and it just served as a cold open. In fact, the opening sequence, it really is just a cold open, as at least for now, it held no overall impact into the entire story, but it was definitely a great and surprising way to begin the film. I feel like some of the downtime in the movie drags just a little bit, and I understand this is mainly for character development, but there isn't much character to begin with a lot of these people. However, this movie fixed a problem in the second movie in terms of runtime, where this movie feels a lot more tightly put together, despite it still being longer than the original first film. The acting has definitely gotten better from the first movie, but there's still some moments from minor characters that aren't great to watch either. Overall, I had an amazingly fun time with this movie. I feel like I got a taste for what people were probably feeling when they would go watch exploitation films in the 70s. It almost feels wrong to view such a film with all of the excessive gore in such a big screen, especially in big mainstream chain cinemas. How Damien Leone was able to pull this off is impressive in its own right, and the publicity it's getting from the people who probably aren't as in tune with the franchise is funny to see more than anything. I don't think I've expressed this much joy in watching a horror film in the cinema since at least a few months ago, probably when I saw In a Violent Nature. I really am just a sucker for insanely impressive practical effects that show off the capabilities of gore. They usually just come out great and make for an entertaining watch, which this movie, for a good majority of its runtime, was. I'm giving Terrifier 3 4 stars. It is a riot from start to finish that, if you're a fan of the horror genre, and specifically this franchise, will have you smiling wildly, making you feel like some deranged sicko for enjoying such horrific things on screen. But it's all done in a really fun and entertaining way that I couldn't help but love. It's home to some decent performances with an okay story that doesn't hold all that much weight in the grand scheme of things, as like most of the other movies in this franchise. The story really does take a backseat to let all the effects take center stage. This is probably the most sickening Art the Clown has ever and will ever be, and I'm definitely excited to see how Leone will top himself with the fourth and supposedly last installment in the franchise. It's really great entertainment that deserves to be watched on the big screen.